You ever sit with yourself and realize that the people who were supposed to protect you, your own family, were the ones who wired your self-worth into the ground before you even understood what self-worth meant? Yeah, nobody wants to say it out loud, but I will, because somebody needs to. Before you even had the words to define your pain, someone was handing you shame disguised as discipline, silence disguised as strength, conditional love disguised as structure. And before you scroll away thinking this is just another video pointing fingers at your parents, pause. Because what we're diving into isn't about blame, it's about truth. The kind of truth that rattles you deep in your gut. The kind you've probably tried to bury under busy schedules, surface-level relationships, and self-help quotes that never seem to stick. The reality is brutal. You didn't choose your first blueprint. You didn't get to handpick the voices that would echo in your head at 2 a.m., reminding you that you're not enough. You didn't get to choose the hands that either held you or hurt you when you were too small to even explain what was happening. But those hands, those voices, they got to shape you anyway. They etched themselves into the soft clay of who you were becoming. Franz Kafka, yeah, the guy who wrote about men turning into cockroaches and being swallowed by faceless systems. He got this. He wasn't writing fiction to entertain. He was bleeding his trauma onto paper. His father didn't beat him, but he crushed him all the same, with coldness, impossible expectations, and a deep refusal to ever see the boy in front of him as enough. Kafka grew up with this weight on his chest, one he never fully shook off. And let's be real, many of us are carrying that same invisible weight. You're born into this world full of light, 3, maybe 4 years old, all potential, all softness, all wonder. Your brain is like fresh cement. Every word spoken to you, every glance you receive, every hug given or withheld, it all sinks in. And while that cement is setting, your parents are often trying to fix themselves, blindfolded, wounded, and lost. Your mother might be carrying trauma she never unpacked. Your father might be operating off a manual handed to him by a man who thought fear was a parenting tool. And you're caught in the middle, learning to perform, to survive, to make yourself small just to avoid being in the way. And no, they did their best doesn't mean they did it right. We have this cultural obsession with sugarcoating childhood. If your parents fed you and clothed you and didn't hit you, you're supposed to be grateful. You're supposed to zip it up and carry on. But let's not pretend love is measured in groceries and tuition fees. Did they hear you? Did they hold space for your feelings without brushing them off like dust on the furniture? Or did they reward performance and punish vulnerability? Maybe you grew up in a house where no one screamed. Great. But did anyone ever really speak to you? Did anyone ask how your heart was doing? Or was silence the norm? Silence so loud it convinced you your feelings were dangerous. That needing love was embarrassing. That having emotions made you weak. And that silence, it doesn't stay in childhood. It follows you into your relationships, into your career, into your self-worth. Kafka never sent that 47-page letter to his dad, but he wrote it anyway, because some pain demands to be spoken, even if it never gets heard. He wrote about how his father made him feel like a nothing, not because he was one, but because that's what he internalized. That's what years of being unseen, unvalued, and unloved turned into. A man who couldn't recognize his own brilliance because his father never reflected it back at him. Sound familiar? That's the programming, the deep wiring you didn't consent to, installed before you had any firewalls, before you could say, "No, I don't want to believe this about myself." And here's the real trap. You keep chasing the approval you never got. You build entire lives hoping someone will finally say, "You're enough, you matter." But that moment, it might never come. And even if it does, it's not enough. Because the one who needed to hear it is still waiting back there, in that childhood bedroom, thinking they have to earn love to deserve it. It's not just the trauma that happened, it's also the love that never arrived, the warmth you never received, the connection you were starving for but had to live without. You might have had parents who were physically there, but emotionally absent. Parents who checked the boxes but never saw your soul. And now you're walking through life trying to check boxes too, hoping success will make up for emptiness, hoping relationships will fix the blueprint, hoping if you give enough, do enough, shrink enough, Someone will finally choose you the way you were never chosen back then. But here's the gut-punching truth. That little version of you, they're still in there. And they're not asking for pity. They're asking to be seen. They're the one who shows up when your anxiety spikes for no reason. When you feel like a fraud even after people praise you. When you push people away just to avoid the possibility of being left again. That's the child within you waving a red flag saying, "Please stop ignoring me. I've been hurting for a long time." And that inner child, they don't want you to fake smile through another toxic friendship. They don't want you to keep chasing achievements, hoping someone claps loud enough to drown out the silence they grew up in. They want the truth, not the sanitized Sunday dinner version of your story. The real one. The one that admits that even though you love your family, they failed you in ways you still haven't found the words for. That you weren't nurtured, you were managed. That you weren't celebrated, you were tolerated. And the hardest part, they might not even know they did it. But you know who feels it? You. In the way you overthink every text, in the way you shrink in the presence of authority, in the way you can't receive love without suspecting there's a catch. That's not personality, that's programming. Passed down like a family heirloom nobody asked for. Your dad's emotional distance wasn't an isolated flaw. It was passed to him by a man who taught him to suppress tenderness. Your mom's anxiety didn't start with you. It came from decades of quiet panic handed down by a woman who never felt safe enough to breathe easy. You're not broken. You're carrying more than one lifetime of pain. You're living in a system built on emotional inheritance. And if you don't unpack it, you'll pass it down too, just like they did. Trauma doesn't die in silence. It mutates. It wears new clothes. It finds new ways to survive in the bodies of people who never had a say in the matter. That's why you end up with a temper you can't explain, a sadness you can't locate, a fear that shows up even when everything looks fine on paper. Kafka wrote about systems that made no sense, places where you were always on trial, always falling short, always just one step away from being punished for something you didn't understand. Sound familiar? That wasn't fiction. That was dinner at the table where your feelings were met with sighs. That was coming home with a report card and getting a lecture instead of a hug. That was being taught, quietly and consistently, that your value had conditions, that love came with terms, that safety could vanish if you said the wrong thing. And now you're grown, but still living under those terms. You stay quiet when you should speak up. You over-apologize for existing. You stay in situations that suffocate you just to avoid feeling like a disappointment. That's not adult life. That's childhood echoing through everything. But here's the part that wrecks people. The moment you realize that the childhood you wanted isn't coming back, that you won't wake up to different parents, that the things you needed then, you're the one who has to give them to yourself now. Nobody tells you how hard that is, how unnatural it feels to be your own nurturer, to look at your pain and say, "I believe you, I see you, I've got you now," because no one ever modeled that. No one showed you how to hold yourself when the tears won't stop, how to speak gently to yourself when your mind spirals into shame. You were taught to suppress, to numb, to distract, not to feel. And healing? Healing demands that you feel everything you were punished for expressing. It means grieving the childhood you never got, mourning the versions of your parents that only existed in your imagination, and forgiving yourself for not being able to just move on like everyone told you to. The world wants you productive, not whole. It wants you functional, not free. Because a healed person doesn't need to prove anything. A healed person doesn't chase approval or seek out toxic love just to feel something familiar. A healed person is dangerous to a system built on brokenness. That's why real healing is lonely. Because it separates you from the people who told you your pain was imaginary. It makes you question relationships you once thought were normal. It forces you to walk away from love that mirrors your trauma more than it meets your needs. And that's terrifying. But it's also liberation. Because once you stop living for the version of you they created, once you start living for the version you were meant to become, you get to write the ending of your story. Kafka never escaped his father's shadow completely, but in his writing, he found cracks of light, moments of freedom, truths that cut through the noise and name the thing we all feel but don't know how to say. And that's what you get to do too, whether it's through writing, therapy, art, prayer, or just finally telling your story without shame. You get to crack through the frozen parts of yourself and let that light in. Because here's what nobody told you. Healing doesn't mean fixing what's broken. It means finally listening to the parts of you that have been screaming in silence. It means choosing to stop running from yourself. It means pulling up a chair for your pain instead of burying it under fake smiles, overachievement, and busyness. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about finally becoming who you were before the world told you who to be. And that takes guts, real guts. Because facing this stuff, it's brutal. It means looking back at the moments you used to defend, it wasn't that bad, or they meant well, and admitting they were that bad, that you didn't deserve that silence, that coldness, that pressure, that you were a child trying to survive a battlefield while convincing yourself it was home. And once you accept that truth, it changes you. You can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending that just because your parents stayed together or paid for school, that everything was fine. And the industry won't save you either. The mental health world wants to slap a label on you and hand you pills. The self-help world wants to sell you toxic positivity like it's medicine. They want you numbed or distracted, not awakened. Because awakened people ask questions. Awakened people stop tolerating mistreatment. Awakened people burn down the stories that kept them small. And you, if you've made it this far, are starting to awaken. And that's dangerous. That's powerful. There's a quote Kafka wrote that should be tattooed across every broken heart. A book must be the axe for the frozen sea inside us. Your truth, your story, is that axe. Not the polished version you tell people to avoid discomfort, the real one. The ugly, trembling, angry, grieving human one. That's the story that will set you free. But you've got to choose it. You've got to stop telling your family's version of your childhood and start telling your own. Because if you don't, that frozen sea stays frozen. That child stays waiting. And you keep building your life on a foundation made of silence and shame. But if you face it, if you go back and feel what you never got to feel, you stop the cycle. You become the adult that wounded child needed. You create the home within yourself that you never had growing up. And no one can take that from you. Ever. You don't heal by ignoring your past. You heal by making peace with it. By holding your story with compassion and saying, that happened? It wasn't okay. But I survived. And now I choose different. You choose boundaries. You choose rest. You choose softness. You choose to stop earning love and just start being love. So, before you click away, sit with this. No distractions. Just you and your story. Ask yourself, what wounds am I still living from? What rules am I still following that were never mine? What version of myself am I protecting that doesn't even serve me anymore? And what would happen, really happen, if I let that go? Because the life waiting for you on the other side of this pain, it's real, it's honest, it's yours. Not built on approval or performance or pretense, but on truth, on clarity, on self-respect. That's where freedom lives. And if this video cracked something open in you, if you felt seen, felt understood, felt something you've been trying not to feel, then don't just let it end here. Share it. Pass it on. Because someone you love is probably carrying wounds they don't even have words for yet. Be the mirror they've never had. And if no one's ever told you before, let me be the first. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not broken. You are a human being who was wired to love and be loved. And the most radical thing you can do now is to love that kid inside you like they've been waiting their whole life for it. Because they have. Now go protect them. Go love them. Go become everything they were never allowed to be. They're counting on you. And you are finally strong enough to show up.